Hi and welcome back to the Whole Life Challenge, the Mindful Mobility series with me, Luke Jones from HeroMovement.net. Today we're looking at the hips. So the hips are an area of the body that often can get a little bit stiff, can hold a lot of tension. There's a lot of big muscle groups surrounding the hips, a lot of force generated from those muscle groups, and from our everyday habits like sitting and mainly sitting, a lot of these muscle groups can get switched off. We can lose a lot of the motions that are available to us around the hip joint, and also the knees as well. A lot of the hip movements that we're going to be doing are going to be also incorporating the knees, closing down that angle, nourishing the joints, freeing things up and getting you moving like you want to be moving. So we're going to start today checking in with the hips, just feeling them out, see how they feel. You could do a few little circles side to side, a few little mini squats. Just notice if there's any tension. You could dig your hands into the hip flexors or into the side. Notice if there's anything that feels a little bit off, anything that feels good. Just taking that baseline check to see how things are feeling for you. So we're going to start now with just some basic forward and back motions in that sagittal plane, just that hip hinge, keeping the spine long, the core tight, hinging back a little bit, and then extending up. Hinging back, and then that hip extension, engaging the glutes. Just a few repetitions. And inhale as we go back. Exhale as we extend at the top. And then take it sort of side to side. Take the hips side to side. Similar to that thoracic shift we did in the neck shift, we're just shifting the hips this time. Side to side. Just gliding through. Nothing too complicated. If it's only a little bit of motion for now, that's great too. Now we're going to start to combine those motions into some big hip circles. So really opening up through the front of the hip flexors that often get tight, outside of the hip, and then back through the glutes and the hamstring as well as we hinge back. It's a really nice, nourishing movement. Switch to the other side. If you gain nothing from this mobility course, at least you'll have a few new moves on the dance floor. So that's quite a nice one, just to start loosening up the hips, start getting a little bit of motion into that area. So we're going to come down into a squat position now, hinging at the hips, keeping that core and spine straight, and then bending at the knees. So we're going as low as we can whilst keeping our upper back straight. So if that means you're up here, or if it means you need to use some blocks underneath your heels, like so, keep that upper back sort of straight. We have a little bit of natural curvature at the lower back. Just keeping that upper back straight so you can be in a comfortable position to work from. So in an ideal world, the low squat is a resting position. If you look at kids, you look at little toddlers, or you look at people living a very natural sort of tribal hunter-gatherer lifestyle, this is a position that they rest in, that they play in, they eat, they go to the toilet. But because of a lot of the habits that we picked up in the Western world, because of a lot of our comforts, this is often a position that we lose. But it's not all bad news. With a little bit of work, we can regain this and we can bring it back into our movement toolkit. So we're just checking in here, seeing how things feel. If you can get down into this low squat, that's excellent. If not, then that's great too. You can use a wall to balance as well if you need to. You can be up on those blocks. Try and get your feet pointing forwards, slightly turned out, and trying to keep those arches high. The knees are out. You can kind of use your elbows in there a little bit. Shoulders are nice and relaxed, neck's tall, and we're just kind of resting here and seeing how that feels. Just moving around a little bit, checking in. So we've loosened things up a little bit with the hip circles. There might still be a bit more stiffness here. Now that we've closed the knees down as well, you can sort of feel if there's any differences there from side to side. So we're going to start now with some internal and external rotation. So we've done a little bit of flexion and extension through the hips and a bit of sideways motion. Now we're going to start rotating. So coming down into a seated position, putting your hands behind you. You can also go down to your elbows if that's a little bit more comfortable. If you can come up to your hands, then that's great. You're going to lift the hips up. So lift them up to the sky, and you're going to come onto the ball of your foot, of the one foot. I'm going to start to rotate that in, rotate that knee, and then rotate it outwards to the side. So try and relax through the neck, and we're just slowly rotating, staying on the ball of that foot. You might notice things are a little bit clunky, a little bit clicky, and that's okay. As long as there's no pain, then we're all good. Shake out the wrists a little bit, shake out the shoulders. This isn't an endurance competition. Again, lift those hips up. On the other side, ball of the foot, rotating the knee in and out. My hips are feeling particularly tight after a lot of driving and playing football on the weekend. So it's interesting to note how these things that we can sometimes take for granted during our everyday life can actually affect our mobility, affect our positioning. So come back into that squat now. Things might feel a little bit easier, they might not. It's okay for now. We're going to play around now with an exercise from Ido Portal I picked up. So we're going to bring the shoulder down into this knee crease. Then we're going to gently push into external rotation. So we can use the strength of our legs to get it so far, and then just give a little bit of extra help with the hand. So we're not forcing it out, we're just easing it into that end range. Just touching with the boundaries and easing it past the boundary. We can also do the same, closing the knee down. So we can push out, we can close down. We can use the other hand on the floor to balance. Just gliding through that internal and external rotation. Again, if you need to be up on the blocks, using the wall for support, that's completely fine too. So on this side, got a little bit more range of motion. It's just noticing those differences from side to side. We add the internal rotation there as well. Just be careful with this one. We don't want to be forcing anything. We're just gently encouraging the body to adapt to new positions. Okay, just shift things around a little bit now. We're going to fall back onto the bum. The feet are out in front. Now we're going to turn towards one side, and then the back leg is going to come up. So we're in what we could call a 90-90 position. So this leg is internally rotated, and there's a 90-degree bend at the knee. This one is externally rotated, 90 degrees bend at the knee. So we're just going to use our hands. We can lean forward a little bit here. I'll feel a bit of a stretch on the outside of the right hip. Come back up to center. If you need to use your hands behind you, that's great too. Then we'll switch sides. Keeping the spine long, we'll lean towards this side as well. Using the hands again, switch sides. Back up, center, side. If we can do it now without using the hands, that's great too. If you need to use the hands still, that's completely fine. Start to build a bit more strength in the hips and the end range by reducing our need for the hands. We can also then add a strengthening element. So if this feels okay for you, if it feels alright for your knees, when we get to this end range, we're then going to extend up, squeeze through the glutes, come back down, back to center, switch sides, extend up, squeeze in those glutes. It's an exercise we use in jiu-jitsu quite a lot. Seen the guys at MoveNat use this one too. It's a great one for all-round hip mobility and strength. Come back one last time. Again, if you need to use your hands throughout this or a wall, that's completely fine. So we're now going to work into another strengthening exercise. So if you need to be up high for this one, then that's completely fine. We're going to be doing what we call Cossack squats. So leaning from one side. If you need to have your hands on the floor, that's great. Then we're going to come back to center and then squat into this side. Ideally, we want to progress towards getting right down low, closing the knee down completely again, really nourishing the knee joint. Then using the hands, we're keeping the hips low and shifting our weight from side to side. Again, if you're up here for now, that's completely fine. You might hear a few clicks, that's fine too. So it's just shifting our weight from side to side. You could even have your foot up on a block if you're struggling with ankle mobility here. Again, we want to be able to try and keep that spine fairly long throughout this. So we're upright here. If that's feeling comfortable, then we can progress this a little bit more. As we come down to this side, we can then sit the body down and close the knee down too. Then we can open up, reach forward and come back up. If you need to use your hands throughout that, it can help you come back up, that's great. Come back across to this side, slowly sit down, close that knee to the floor, open back up. If you need to just stick with the first variation, then that's amazing. You do what's right for your body today. You can then also, if you want to take things further again, take your hands off the floor completely. Try and just use the strength, mobility in your hips to take you through. So finish now with one last strengthener and come back down onto the floor. Lower back is flat to the floor again, like when we did the dead bug exercise with the core. Feet are close into the butt, core's engaged, shoulders are back and down. We're going to just lift the hips to the ceiling. Tuck in that tailbone under, really extending and trying to activate those glutes. Nice deep breaths now into the chest, into the ribs, into the belly. Pushing down through the heels. Slowly roll the spine down. I'm going to roll to the side and then come up to your variation of the squat. So whether that was on the blocks or up a little bit higher or the full squat. I'm just going to see how that feels now after that session. So do you notice any difference? I find that particularly the Cossack squat exercise over here, that tends to open things up quite a lot for me, and I feel a lot more relaxed now just after that 10-15 minutes or so than I did at the start. But it's just noticing how that feels for you right now. So your homework for today is just to have a play around with the squat. See if you can spend just 5-10 minutes a day just down in your variation of the squat in the lowest position. Is there any chance for you to switch from sitting, whether that's watching TV or having food, switch from sitting to squatting? Or maybe when you're cleaning your teeth, could you do it squatting? It's just trying to bring this movement pattern back into your everyday life so it becomes something that's just part of your lifestyle. And that's essentially the best way for us to improve our mobility, is to make it something that we're doing unconsciously, something that's just kind of built in to our environment. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you again for watching. If you want to dig into mobility a little bit more, remember you're more than welcome to join me at heromovement.net as part of the Hero Academy. I've put together a bunch of free mobility resources over there for you, some free mobility and movement guides. So you can find all that at heromovement.net. I'll catch you tomorrow, and in the meantime, have a healthy, heroic day.